so much has been going on the last 2 months with first the pandemic, and now we're in a stage. Like, you're in LA right now, or?
I'm in West Hollywood. So actually I'm in the middle of the riots and, we like curfew and teaching kids school. My son's been graduating virtually. So I'm in the middle of everything.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. I live in like the Pico Robertson area. So when I heard a lot of the sirens and ambulances, in 10 minutes, I said, okay, I think this is some civil unrest. So you're not a stranger, and it sounds like your family's not a stranger to hard times and tragedy. So I have to ask, how are you dealing with this, being a mother?
I think it's my job to instill values in my kids. And, I try to do my best to make them empathetic and kind and, support humanity. For me, there's only human being who, there's nothing else. Like if you treat another person as a human being and you just don't put labels on them, other than that, I think it's the most important thing. And, that's what I try to teach them. Also, it's interesting, like doing my stand-up, I noticed when the pandemic started, I grew up in food lines and we actually didn't have food. So it's interesting that people are like so stressed out. I don't think it ever happened to this country to that extent. So I think I had some experience, waiting for 2 hours in food lines, and sometimes you don't get to eat anything. Like here, you're like, okay, you're blessed, you have food, just don't get angry over, the toilet paper or any material thing. So I think it's a learning process. I think it's an awakening process for all of us, and reevaluating just our life. And I think it's definitely a blessing in so many ways, It's interesting because I was doing improv groundlings right before it started, and I took a lot from that. I think it's so important to live in the moment and accept whatever is happening, not deny it, because dealing with trauma, it's different for every person, and then just saying yes to and moving forward. So yeah, I'm trying to incorporate all, things that I learn in my life and from my perspective. And, hopefully my kids who are here right now can take a little bit of it. My son is right here.
Well, that's a cool, refreshing thing to hear. Like, I mean, just speaking frankly, man, like our countries, the US, the former Soviet Union and Russia, it always wasn't a great relationship. And it's easy to look at somebody who isn't you as the enemy, but like it's good to be an American and hear this Russian-born person speak in a way about human beings the way it should be, and then recognizing that. So like, thank you. And I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. You're very welcome, man. So another one of the many things cool about you is, you talk about some of the tragedy or having challenges when you were a young child. Your father was a neuroscientist and
nuclear scientist.
Nuclear scientist. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I mixed that up. And he was, I guess, in his profession at a time when, of course, there was the meltdown in Chernobyl. Mm-hmm. And, it just seems like your life has taken on a very interesting path following that. So after you guys get past that, what was life like for you when you started modeling?
There was no such business as show business in Russia because in post-Soviet times, there was still a lot of propaganda in the film business. And, none of my family is in that business. And that's why I never thought that I'm going to be part of this world. I saw it as an opportunity to help my family earn, money. I was making more than my dad at the time when I was like 13. So that was motivation, to help them out. And then I lost my dad at 15. So I had to actually support my family. I have a younger sister and my mom. And I knew that, this kind of job will help like educate my sister and she can have more choices in life, and I can help my mom, who was a, home, she was not working for a long time because she was waiting in lines for food for us, and that was very time consuming. So it was interesting. I mean, I had to grow up really fast, and I think a lot of people have this misconception about modeling that, you have no problems, it's a very glamorous life. And it's not. You're a teenager, you come from a different country, you have to sign contracts, you have to negotiate deals, you have to grow up very fast, and you have to be consistent. It's a job. Like, you have to show up on time, you leave on time, you have to stay healthy. There's a lot of things that are involved into that I think is a big misconception about this industry.
I'm glad you touched on those points, because a lot of times people make the mistake in looking at the end product and associating that with, oh, this is great and this is glamour, or glamorous, but there's a path and there's a journey, and it's hard regardless of how beautiful you may be or how wealthy you may be sometimes. So it's good that you point that out. So when you realized that you were earning more money than your father at the time, was that at all uncomfortable?
My dad is very open-minded, and it wasn't about like who's making more. We're really united family, and for us it was just helpful to buy food and things like that. We weren't really competing. I wasn't competing with my dad. It's maybe a different culture and perspective, but my dad was all about research and books. He wanted to work with ecology, actually. Supporting like different ecological issues, but the government, it wasn't possible at the time because the government, steered him towards like nuclear science and things like that. So, I'm happy to kind of help with some ecological issues right now, like anti-plastic and things like that, and kind of support what he started doing. But regarding the money, I think we had very different perception of that.
It's actually good to hear. It's like you sound like you were a family in the truest sense. Like, it wasn't about competing with your father or your father making you feel bad because you were earning more money. It's about, the well-being and the good of the family. And good for you as a teenager to recognize that.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, my dad was a big inspiration. He instilled a lot of values in me, like kindness and, compassion and looking outside of the box, because a lot of times science is perceived as like a very, narrow path. But I think a lot of scientists are very open-minded. They have to discover things. So we were always surrounded by a lot of artists, and, that taught me open-mindedness and looking at life from different perspectives.
So when you were modeling, what are some of the brands and designers or labels you were working with?
I worked with so many brands, and it was very interesting. I think the first person who discovered me was Yves Saint Laurent. I wasn't working for a year because I was super shy, and as a model, you have to be very confident in yourself. And somehow Yves Saint Laurent, saw something, I think, similar maybe in himself, like that, introversion. I think he was like that. So it was very interesting to work with different designers from that time on, like Alexander McQueen and Yohji Yamamoto. Like, there are just so many incredible different designers. And it was more about learning how they, as an artist, create an image and clothes rather than just being like an object,
I saw something cool in your bio, is that you were a part of, I guess, what was described as the Russian Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, that was kind of a one at a time thing that I did. But yeah, we have, it's called Yeralash. It's basically kind of a Saturday Night Live, a comedy, but it involves kids. It's really hard to describe. But we did comedy, and I was part of, the group of kids that were selected from our school just by accident. And they asked us to show on set. And, that's how I was part of that. And I think I just wanted to skip school.
I think one of the old stereotypes is that like tall, beautiful women are boring. They have no personality. But then you have this comedic side, or this funny, silly side. And a lot of us guys love a silly, funny, goofy woman. When did you, like, had you always been like that? Or is that was that a part of you had to sort of nurture and bring out?
It's so funny. I don't think my husband likes that side of me. He's like,
Why?
because I talk too much now, especially, when I'm trying to find my voice. No, I mean, it's a joke. Actually, first of all, I want to start from saying that beauty is very subjective, and I'm really thankful for the fashion industry to being more open right now. When I started modeling, there was one type of beauty, and like you have to fit into that, and thank God it's so much more open, like for different ages and, people of different backgrounds and, different size. So I think it's very objective. And I started doing comedy just because I wanted to find my voice, but also I wanted to break some stereotypes. And it was really hard even being an actor because I kind of found myself in Hollywood right after I had my kids, just because my husband was a producer. All the cliches that, you can throw at me, you can throw. So I found that in Hollywood, it's really hard to kind of break stereotypes because you are dependent on the writer and director, and a lot of storylines, even though they've been opening this past years, they still need to be discussed and opened. And I think it will take some time for our culture. So I found stand-up was a great platform to talk to people directly without any editing or narrative that somebody was telling to me. And I can, talk and see if people would react. And, they did. And of course, laughter is very addictive and very healing for anybody, comedians and also the audience. So I just find it's a great way to bring up some topics that are not easy to discuss.
I know there's a ton of comedy clubs in LA and some other major cities in the US. What is the stand-up comedy scene like in Russia?
It's interesting. I went to Russia for the first time in 11 years, actually, this winter, right before pandemic, to promote The Gentleman, the movie from Guy Ritchie. And it was interesting because people said that stand-up scene is booming there. It's really popular. And I'm like, wow, like we're not the culture who is, kind of known for having stand-up comedians and international scene. And it's true. I used to come from Paris or New York when I first moved to, to other countries and smile at people and say like, hi, like, I'm so happy to see you. And my Russian friends would be like, what are you so happy about? Like, seriously, it's such a straight, direct culture, I think, because we have so much trauma and like, it's very serious. So I'm glad to see that, now Russia actually finds some part of like lighter of themselves. I think laughter, it's an important part of anything. And it's so funny because now in pandemic, a lot of moms in my group, they literally became so good at comedy. I'm like, you guys, when it's done, you're going to be stand-up comedians and sending everybody to the comedy club. Because comedy is just a way to deal with tragedy. It's just part of life. And it's not always like the direct way, but in some way it's still addressing the pains of life. And comics are actually very sensitive and serious people.
You remind me of something a former colleague said. She visited Russia on business, and I think at some point somebody says, "You're American." And she said, "Oh, how did you know?" He said, "Because you're smiling."
I know. My mom, she couldn't get used to it when she came to America. She's like, people smile here. What? Why? Like, I don't know. Maybe they just have optimistic point of view, but I think it's good to balance sometimes and reflect,
There's a good range to, I guess, somewhere to be in. Like I lived in Europe for a little bit, and one thing I brought with me was, the LA or American, kind of a LA thing of when you are crossing paths with somebody and you make eye contact and you give the little fake smile or you give the head nod, but nobody was giving it back to me. I'm like, oh man, these are kind of like cold people here. Like, what's going on? But it's like, that wasn't the thing. It was just like, that's not a part of their custom. Like, oh, okay. It's just like people are nice, but they just don't do that kind of LA phony thing that we do. And I can say that because I'm an LA native, so I can call my own people out on some of the phony stuff we do. So now so you're in Russia, you guys make it through some hard times, you start modeling. What was your transition like in coming to America?
kind of interesting because our culture is so different. And like you said, like looking somebody in the eye, I wasn't used to it at all. Or answering question, how are you doing? And I had so many mixed feelings. And my agency was like, you have to be more social, you have to. So it took me some time to adjust to the culture of talking to strangers on the street, which I love. There's so many beautiful parts of, America where I think it's like in other countries in Europe, people are more reserved sometimes, at least in Russia, or in Paris, the cultures that I experienced, or Japan, where I lived, to London. But I feel in America, it was normal to talk to strangers on the bus and kind of share some things, and maybe you're not going to see them again, but it's a shared piece of humanity, and that's a beautiful thing. So it took me a while to get used to it, but I also love the solidarity and, the sense of freedom that people feel in this country. I think it's so important. And whatever we're going through right now, I think it's very, it's going to heal a lot of wounds that, our society has in general. But I love this good part of America, the fight for justice and human rights, and, how many people came to protest on the streets. It's just beautiful to see.
What are your feelings when you observe a lot of the political tension between this country and Russia? And you can even going back, particularly during the 2016 election and periodically throughout the country, Russia comes up as, and I don't think I have to call out some of the, tense or negative connotations with it. But I guess my ultimate question for you is, yeah, man, how does it feel sort of living in both those worlds and observing what's happening?
Well, it's interesting because I grew up around politics, so I definitely would say I'm a humanitarian. And I understand that behind every political kind of, leader person, there's so much more that's happening. They're just the front of one thing, and it can be very controversial. I actually went to see, Hillary on the tour when she was on her presidential campaign, just because, I was curious to learn more from that. There's a lot of economical things that, are behind the elections as well. I'm definitely a liberal, and I support all the human rights. I know that it's an utopian belief to believe that, we're going to arrive at that, because I think it's all about the values. I grew up in communism, and I saw a lot of corruption going on behind, the notion that we're all equal. And, my dad never took anything from the government, but a lot of our friends became oligarchs and things like that. So it wasn't really equally divided, our country. It's hard, I do the impersonation of Melania just to understand where we stand. I want my kids to be respectful. I have boys and girls both. So I think whatever is happening in Hollywood too, with Me Too movement, I think there's so much polarization, but I work with organization, we do it together. I feel it's like a next step, in our evolution. So I do believe that one day society, we will arrive at that, hopefully. At equal rights for everybody, no matter what. And, even in comedy, when I started doing that, because it's not a female world a lot of times. And I was told to dress down and, kind of to be a certain way, but I said it's not authentic to me. So, I believe in uniqueness and compassion, and, hopefully we will arrive, but not at this point.
Okay. So then you find yourself in the United States, and at some point you transition to acting. What was that whole process like for you?
It was interesting because I found myself in the middle of Hollywood, despite, maybe I didn't know that I'm going to be here. I was actually studying business on the side. I had a business school online, and then I met my husband, and he was a producer based in Los Angeles. And when I had my kid, I moved here. So I kind of found myself in the middle of this world, which I didn't understand whatsoever. But it was interesting. I mean, I met a lot of creative artists, and as a model in Los Angeles, there's no really market for high fashion. So I went to audition for Rodrigo Prieto, who did, Babel, and won an Oscar for his cinematography. And he wanted to make a film for teenagers with Elle Fanning about like your body image. And, he had a lot of interesting messages in that film. So I auditioned for that and got to be part of it. And then I learned a lot from my husband being, in the business.
I saw a clip. I think was it Bad Moms? Where you like, Eugenia, I try to be a guy who's not just going to tell people things that they like to hear and just be nice. Like that was funny. Like I thought, and just to give whoever's listening context on the scene, there was like sort of this, I think it was a town hall meeting. And then at some point women started to just sort of declare certain things. And then I guess you were a Russian mom, and then you yelled something in Russian that had nothing to do with like the other comments that were made, but just like the comedic timing of it or the delivery was like very good. Like, okay, like she's legitimately a funny actress.
Comedy is a lot about timing, like 80% of communication is nonverbal. And it was interesting. I studied with Jerry Corley, who used to write for Letterman before. And now he helps a lot of different, people who want to speak and find their voice and find what is humor. And there's a lot of math actually and music to humor. So it's almost like being a musician to some way, and it's very psychological and things like that. So, I learned it. It's not like a natural skill that I had, especially in a different language. I think humor is very cultural too. That's why sometimes like looking at comedies, American comedies maybe not always work the genre in other countries just because the humor is very cultural to any country. So it took me a while to learn, American humor, but I love it.
What's the difference between American humor and Russian humor?
I haven't watched a lot of Russian comedians, to be honest. I have to catch up kind of to that. But I think it's very dry and maybe more sarcastic, like in some British comedians are much more dark and sarcastic. I think here we still are very positive. We like to cover things up a little bit more, and I think it's a little bit less sarcastic than maybe in other parts of the world.
You just described everybody in my family.
Okay.
Dark, sarcastic,
Well, maybe you can join me in the Comedy Store.
Ooh, I used to want to, I thought about exploring comedy, and, it's one of those things where people want me to focus more on my humorous side. And I just haven't. Like, part of the reason honestly, it was fear. Like, I didn't want to spend 5 years in a comedy store bombing. But yeah, it's like something people try to pull out of me, and I guess they enjoy it. It's just, I don't know.
You have to really want to be a comedian, honestly, because who wants to be there, like, totally naked with their self on stage and people just judging you like constantly right and left.
That's my observation as well. Like, you either have to really be in and love it and be devoted to it, or man, it looks like it could be really painful. Yeah, it sucks. So like with your acting, okay, so you've done some comedic acting. Like, are there certain roles that have challenged you in stretching your ability? Hollywood
is an interesting place because a lot of times it's hard to get out of the cliche of the storytelling that we have. And, I'm so glad that there's so many amazing actors who push that to open the envelope, It's been challenging because mostly I've been playing like Russian spies and, Russian gold diggers or women of the oldest profession, which is like a big cliche. I mastered those roles. I was lucky enough to play a wife and a mom last year with Eric Roberts in a film in New York. And I was so surprised that they cast me, even though like I'm a mom in real life. I was like, are you sure you want me? Like, I have a Russian accent. Like, I don't play moms or wives in Hollywood. Like, are you sure? And the director was really nice. He said, yeah, we want you. So I think it's interesting because I started producing as well. And I think it's really important for actors to produce their own content. Like, and a lot of people don't understand. I think it's important, it's really important to understand that you can push the envelope. And that's what I intend to do. I think something more as a human being rather than being like a Russian or anything else would be a great stretch. And I feel like I'm succeeding in some roles that I can, be part of next year. I can't talk a lot about it yet, but.
Is there a certain kind of role or a certain piece of content that you want to be a part of?
First of all, I would love to start with some romantic parts, and I have actually a romantic comedy coming up, because a lot of times, if I have an accent, so that means I can't be likable, like you have to play like a bad, whatever, snobbish and, things like that. It's just like automatically. So I think being somebody likable is the first step to start. But then also I love what Charlize Theron did in Monster. She kind of, brought up the dark and shadow side of humanity. I think it's really important to embrace and, also show that, kind of bring it on the surface, something that, we need to heal in ourselves.
It was a great performance and she really transformed herself. I think I remember, and we're talking about Monster for whoever's listening, she shaved her eyebrows and this very petite woman gained, I don't know, man, I want to say she gained like 50 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
Like she really looked different. So that begs another question. Do you ever imagine transforming yourself like that for a role?
For sure. If, that's what every actor is looking for, to collaborate with, writers and directors that could see you outside of who you are, and that stretches your compassion. I think anybody who is in acting is into that because they have a compassion for different stories and different lives. And, it would be a gift to do something outside of yourself. As scary as it sounds, that takes a lot of courage, I think, to experience somebody else's life for a while.
I'm noticing that you're wearing the shirt with Uma Thurman from Kill Bill. So that tells me that maybe you want to get into a little action, a little, a role where you can kick a little ass.
Well, it's funny because my husband gave me this T-shirt. He runs Miramax now. And, his name is Bill. So I think it's very funny that he gave me a shirt.
So you wear a Kill Bill shirt when you're mad at him?
Yeah, you see why he doesn't appreciate my comedy. It's just part of the library. I think it was interesting, that movie. Of course, I started doing actually action roles for a lot, like maybe 10 years ago with Sam Hargrave. I did a film called The Game Changer. Sam directed Extract, a movie now with Chris Hemsworth. It's out on Netflix. You guys should check it out. It's amazing. He's like a master of action, creating action sequences. One of the best films, I think, in that sense. And, I was asked a lot, like, oh, you're a girl, like, why do you want to do action films? But I think it's also like breaking stereotypes. So I've been doing that for a while. I'm training with Terran Tactical. They train Keanu for John Wick and, Halle Berry and all the actors. They're pretty fantastic in the sense of, physical training and being honest to the role. I think it's important for women to be also able to break some stereotypes in that sense. But it's not like my goal, just to do action films.
That's showing more athletic side. Were you a part of any athletic activities back when you were home in Russia?
I grew up doing ice skating. It's so interesting because when we grew up in Russia, for our culture, you can't just do sports for fun. You have to actually train for Olympics. So they select kids. You have to pass a lot of tests if you want to do a certain sport. And then they see if you fit in or, able to push yourself. So for me, it was an interesting education. When I was like 4, I think, or 5, I started doing that, training, ice skating. It was super cold in Russia, but we had to train. Like I remember literally pouring like hot water on my fingers because I was so frozen. I had to train every day, no matter what, how I feel. I had to stretch. I wasn't as stretchable, so I had to push myself to all the limits. And that gave me, training like willpower and mind over matter in a sense, but also the beauty of like storytelling, because we used to dance on ice. And, I would have become a professional actually athlete, but I just, at some point I asked my parents if it's possible not to, because I knew that it's a very short career and you really, have to be invested. Like you have to feel like it's your path for life. And I just wasn't sure. I felt like it was more of a system that was pushing me to be, like that athletic. I wanted to do it more for fun.
Sports for kids, I mean, particularly in America, it's become so infused with money, and it's almost like a mini profession with the hours that you devote in it. It's like a lot of wear and tear on the body. There was I don't know if you've ever seen it. As a side note, on HBO's Real Sports, there was a segment on child athletes and how performing sports so much just really tears apart their little bodies with their bones and their cartilage, and they suffer through a lot of injuries. So I don't know, maybe it was a blessing that you stopped competing in ice skating when you did.
I think you bring a good point. I don't think it's something we talk a lot about it, but yeah, as a child athlete, I think it's a very, very hard path of life. And I know a lot of athletes because I played tennis after. So I know all the tennis players, like professional ones. And, it is a short career and you have to deal with a lot of injuries and things like that. So it's true,
Is motherhood everything what you thought it would be?
It's a gift. Actually, my doctor said I could never have kids. So it is literally a gift for me. So I had two, of my own, and I have a stepson who is 18. And that's also such a gift and a lesson. I think kids, taught me so much about being present and in the moment, forgiveness and being real. I don't think I ever expected that, especially coming from modeling where it's so self-centered and, you're always like busy because you have to be self-centered for your job to earn money. So it was very interesting. I had to, like, you give up your body and, in the process, it's a natural process. So, it taught me a lot. And, there's no such thing as perfect parenting. I'm learning as well. I know that I'm not their best friend. I'm their mom. So I have to learn how to be responsible for them. And, thank God I have my therapist who helps me.
I think more people should seek therapy. Like I've had therapy myself. Like I've done individual therapy. I did grief therapy after I lost my mother. And, I mean, there's some benefit to that. So good for you. And thank you for like sharing that. I love when people are courageous and honest and sharing their human side,
Yeah, it's interesting because in Russia, we didn't have any therapy. We used to like gather in the kitchen, get super drunk with vodka, and then you discuss everything. But it's not very healthy, So I feel, just self-reflecting in any way you can, like journaling or talking to somebody honestly, it's important because your body stores all this anger or anything and it comes up and you can see that, it comes up in your next conversation or relationship or.
So again, we're in this very, this weird stage in the world. Mm-hmm. And who knows when the economy and socially things will be opened up again. What are you looking forward to the most when we ease back into a normal state, whether it's as a family woman, whether it's in your career with comedy or acting? What are you looking forward to most?
I'm looking to seeing kindness in people's eyes, because I think we've all been through so much and, we learned so many lessons and had that time to self-reflect. So I'm really looking to connect on any level, and just share that, the experience of human life. Honestly, it's like as basic as that. I don't know. We started already doing sets, and I've been doing actually comedy with Damon Dash. He has his channel, and he's been really supportive of all the comedians. We've been doing shows with social distancing and virtual shows, and he's been promoting different TV series. So it's been really great. But any kind of connection, I think, is like, and kind connection would be, something, and a lot of changes, positive changes in the society. I really look into that.
This is a cool moment, man. Like you're the second interview I've had today. And earlier it was another great, what I felt like a human conversation. And what I can't help thinking about is some of the propaganda that paints people with broad brushes. It paints, and look, there's assholes in every culture, there's assholes in every country, but then there's the other side of that story, and that other side of the story is that there's great human beings. And in your case, this Russian woman that lives in America now, and I just wish people would open their minds more of being curious about learning about this person who supposedly is their enemy or their villain, whether it's somebody of a different race, whether it's somebody of a different, from a different culture or a different country. So, I just have to acknowledge that, because you're coming across as a very authentic and a very smart woman. And it's like, I got to acknowledge, I have to acknowledge what I'm seeing in you right now.
Well, thank you so much. It's very generous of you. And, I think it's so profound to say that curiosity and compassion are two qualities that, kind of will move us to the next level in a way, of connection.
Do you have any final thoughts? And I invite you to share anything you'd like, whether it's professionally, about the world, or anything you want to leave us with.
I want to say thank you for having this podcast, for this conversation. I want to thank you, everybody who's listening to this conversation. And, I'm very hopeful that, we will come back in a new way, in a healthier way. And the earth also, you can see the ecology, is changing. The air is much cleaner. I hope that, we will learn from the lesson that was given to us and, move forward. And hopefully there's going to be more comedians after this. So I'm looking forward to sharing humor and life and, pain and everything, and just connect on that level.
One of the cool things about the pandemic is I think there's going to be some great art that comes as a result. Like, I think, and my hope is that there will be some good economic and some good social policy on that level. But having said that, I think there's going to be some funny ass art and some compelling drama and just art in general that comes as a result.
For sure. Artists are the mirror of society. And I think it's an amazing, time that any artist is, like, we're all responsible for, bringing storytelling to that compassion and curiosity.
So if people want access to you and what you're doing next, do you have any websites or social media you'd like to share?
Yeah, usually, I'm pretty active on Instagram, Eugenia Kuzmina, and you can DM me, if there's something I can help. I try to help sometimes, girls who want to start modeling, like asking me for anything or any advice for like actors or anything at all. So trying to, to have a conversation there. You can find me on my website, Eugenia-Kuzmina, and also happy to answer any questions as well and connect.
Well, I'll be sure to include all those links where people can get access to you. And so
I'd love to follow you as well, So
okay.
I'll reach out.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. I'll send along my information to you. Should I just pass it through
Ruthie? Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. A good way to sort of end my Friday. Thank you again for sharing, your story and your honesty and your humanity. And I'm hoping like hell it's infectious with other people.
Thank you. I mean, I wish I was asking questions, because I'm sure you have a lot of stories.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah, I do. I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe when things clear up, man, we will grab coffee or have a phone conversation, whatever.
Sure.
I'm always open to that kind of thing. So, all right. Well, hey, Eugenia, you keep yourself safe, stay funny, stay engaging. Damn, I'm trying to struggle the two words in Russian that I know. Is it Katala?
Yeah. How are you doing?
Katala, das vidanya.
Yeah. Bye. Yeah, that's very good. Wow.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
You're amazing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Be well.
You too. Please stay safe. And maybe if your family push you enough, I'll see you at the comedy store. Let me know.
Yeah, you can watch me bomb. You can heckle me.
Sure, I'll bring a lot of tomatoes.
Okay.